So the director of Don't Breathe in 2013's Evil Dead brings a brand new entry in the Alien franchise. Are his efforts enough to revive the chest-bursting terror of the classic films of the franchise? Well, let's find out. My review of Alien Romulus. When Rain Carradine is denied her work release by the Weyland-Yutani Company on a bleak mining colony, her and her synthetic brother Andy join a group of friends, attempting to commandeer a Weyland-Yutani craft, adrift in orbit. However, when they find the Romulus science space station ravaged, they are soon attacked by dozens of facehuggers, and try to escape with their lives, when a new hive of xenomorphs begin hunting them down, with only hours left before the station crashes into the rings of the planet. So August 16, 2024 is his official wide release of Alien Romulus from 20th Century Studios. Producer Ridley Scott and director Fede Álvarez also co-wrote the screenplay with one of his regular collaborators. And going into the entire film, I felt very much kind of optimistic towards it, because I didn't have very good opinions about Alien Covenant. You go back and watch my review from opening weekend on that one. I felt very kind of down on the whole thing. There's a lot of things about it that just felt like it was betraying what Prometheus set up, and they kind of dashed that to go off in a different direction that just didn't feel very satisfying for me. But going on this thing, I was like, okay, the trailers look good, the vibe of it looks good, it looks like a proper return to the roots of the franchise, very atmospheric, kind of a textured, retro-futuristic setting for everything like that, because as Scott went off with his prequels with Prometheus and Alien Covenant, just kind of made it more of a 21st century futuristic view. Much more holographic, much more high-tech type of stuff, instead of kind of sticking to what the original film in 1979 established as the future of that world, being much kind of an analog future in that regard. And Fede kind of went back and kind of like, I want to make this as direct of a feeling from that film as possible. Get that texture built out the entire world you're dealing with here. And he does that very, very well. I will say, first off, that I didn't really like his Evil Dead. I watched it on opening weekend. I covered it again when I did my Evil Dead retrospective franchise video. It just never hit me very well. It doesn't feel like it had much nuance. It felt like it was just like big, loud, verbose filmmaking. It didn't really do anything for me personally. But I was hopeful on this whole thing that everything would come together very, very well. And there's a lot of complications in my feelings and my reactions to what this film did. There's a lot of great things it does. There's a lot of stuff that really just pissed me the hell off. Like, there's certain filmmaking choices in this thing that make me never want to watch the movie again. But we'll kind of touch on that later on here. But the very good stuff on this thing is the craft. Building it out from that retro-futuristic world you had on the Nostromo. And having all that stuff built up in this entire mining colony where there's like no sunlight on the entire planet ever. There's no daylight here ever on this planet here. And it just has a dank, bleak sensibility. Everything is very industrial and just feels so much like that. And the cinematography looks fantastic. What they did with this thing, I saw this thing in IMAX. And this is one of those films where they can't keep changing the aspect ratio to kind of open it up and stuff like that. The entire film is presented in the full IMAX ratio, and it looked fantastic. The filmmaking work in terms of just the cinematography, the production design, everything that creates the visuals of this world is absolutely fantastic, stellar, masterful work on that end. It's like everything looks so much like it. A lot of people have been saying how they've been reacting to the film, the look of the film, stuff like that. It feels like something that is very much like he would have made it right after the original film. It doesn't feel like something that's so much, anything really too much stands out as something that's too modern. It still maintains that sort of 1980s extension from that 79 film into that whole thing. So it feels like in a visceral, visceral sense, it feels like it fits nicely after Ridley Scott's original film. And you could see kind of aliens kind of branching out from this a few decades in the timeline after this, where the entire film is set, about 20 years after Alien, about 30 or 40 years before the events of Alien. So kind of nestled in there for certain things. They kind of have some things to play with and not try to betray too much of a continuity, but there's certain things it does kind of tangle itself up in certain things. They won't really get into specifics on this whole thing, but just in terms of the filmmaking craft here, the way they did everything in terms of, again, the cinematography, production design, the makeup they use. They use a lot of practical stuff. They have actual guys in suits as the xenomorphs. And you get so much of that quality here where you didn't get that in some other later entries in the Alien franchise where they leaned a lot more into the CGI stuff and it kind of lost some of the tangible sensibility about the actual performer in the suit and how they would use it in terms of just how much they actually show of it. Here they use the tricks of light and shadow and kind of shortcuts here and there and things creeping around the background. They're not showing the whole thing completely exposed in full light. They use a lot of dark imagery in the film very effectively and very strategically to make sure all those things come off very well. So in terms of the craft of creating suspense and atmosphere and all that type of stuff, it's all extremely well done. Benjamin Wallfish's score for the entire film is fabulous. They are harkening back to some of the Goldsmith stuff, some of the James Horner stuff, some other themes that have been brought up throughout the entire franchise here when it became appropriate. I felt fine about it. I kind of like, okay, there's a lot of things in certain franchises where like they don't maintain themes. They kind of change things up for one thing to the next. They don't really maintain a continuity of certain things. If they can keep that type of stuff falling in there every so often, I feel fine about that. As long as they're not completely leaning on it and kind of introduce their own compositions that keep the thing fresh and keep it its own identity while still maintain that sort of sonic thread through and everything like that. I think that's a very good type of thing. So Wallfish is a very fantastic composer. Shows a lot of promise for everything he's done in the last several years. I think they did a really fantastic job with this. The acting in the film is very good. Cailee Spaeny portraying the character of Rain here, I think she did a very, very solid job here. She does emote very well. She creates a character that you can very much empathize with, feel what she's feeling as the film goes along, and be behind her. When things are starting to affect her, they're kind of affecting you as well. When she is kind of worried about different people, this entire group of people that she's kind of tied in. Some people are friends, some people are a little more adversarial, some things are just different layers of relationships in the whole thing. It does kind of reflect on her, and she does bring that out for the audience to connect with what's going on here. So I did feel like when some people were kind of making some really decisions that you could see that are going in the really bad direction, it's like, man, I don't want you to do that because I really don't want you to be doing that right now. Don't make that decision because I think it's a bad decision. We'd like to have you stick around. So that's a very good type of thing to create those types of things, even though, like I said, certain characters like Rain, like the character of Andy, her companion and brother and stuff like that, who's actually a synthetic in the film, all these things come together very well. All these people kind of create nice characters that kind of pull the story together as well as it can. I do think David Jonsson as Andy does a very good job to create a very complex performance that he has to create as things kind of alter for him throughout the course of the film and has to play different reactions, different sort of stoic sensibilities about the character here. So he does a very good job. I think everyone does a very good job in the cast. The problems I have going on in this film is the fan service. I just don't understand why everyone's so just can't stop doing fan service in these kind of legacy sequels. They just have to keep leaning on little iconography or little images, or they have to go really, really questionable decisions about doing some major things with the entire presentation of the film. There's something they do here. I'm gonna dance around this thing as much as I can, not be completely spoilerific, but there's a certain decision they have with a character they introduce that just made me want to stand up and walk out of the theater because it pissed me off that much, because it's very much a digital filmmaking technique has become very, very prevalent over the last maybe 10 years or so that I just don't like it. Especially in this case, I just felt it was just kind of a slap in my face. It's like, I just hate it so much. Anyone who's already seen the film probably is kind of linking towards what I'm talking about here, and it really just pissed me off because it's unnecessary. It's grossly unnecessary. It just reeks of just maybe a studio wanting to do this. I don't know if it's studio notes. I don't know if it's Fede Álvarez wanting to do it. I don't know if it's Ridley Scott wanting to do it. I don't know whose call this was, but everyone went along with it apparently because it's in the movie and it's very prominent in the movie and recurs over and over again. It really just, it almost takes the whole film for me. It took a good amount of work for this film to kind of get a little bit more goodwill back into me by what it was doing with the craft of everything going on, with the scares and the character work here and there. They kind of made that up to myself, but I still was not happy about this by the end of the film. I felt it was just a real gross type of thing for them to do. I just don't approve of it whatsoever, and it just pissed me off because it was just grossly, grossly unnecessary. They could have done any other thing in this case aside from what they actually did. So there's that. And there's just, when you get up to the third act, is the final act of the entire film, because it almost works as the fourth act. You feel like you've already gotten a climax and things are kind of settling down and things are fine, aside from a kind of a hanging plot thread. You don't know if they're going to hang on to it for a sequel bait or they're going to wrap it back around in this whole thing. And the way they go about this thing is just like, there are certain elements of what they do here that feel like you're borrowing some bad ideas from like Alien Resurrection and Alien vs. Predator Requiem. Like, two films are not terribly well liked, with some very objectionable, some pretty gross choices that they have in those films, and it's like, really, you're gonna go that route and try and do this thing? It's like, it's such a difficult thing to kind of assess with this film, because again, there's some great scares, there's some great set pieces, they're very inventive type of things. There's a certain aspect of the film where they have the sort of gravity kind of going on and off the entire place, and there's a certain set piece later on that very much does very well with the entire concept that they set up very nicely. A lot of things are going off very well in terms of like just getting good scares. Like, the fact is, this is the scariest the Xenomorph has been in over like 30 fucking years. This is the scariest thing past anything that they've tried over and over again. They're trying to resurrect it and trying to get it back into certain places where it just feels like it could be effective again. This is the best thing, because it's all down to the craft. How they use it, how effective it is. Just the skills of suspense and tension, again, the atmosphere, the mood, everything like that. All the things you have, the sound design, the cinematography, the cramped quarters, all the different things just used to the most effect to make the Xenomorph scary again. Because you have the characters there in certain situations, they're very terrifying. And so that works extremely well, but it just feels like a greatest hits compilation. It feels like you're just taking a lot of the different elements that worked in all the other things and just kind of throwing them together and mixing them up the pot here to kind of get them all to kind of fit together, and think that just feels satisfying in that regard. When you get to some of the new ideas, they're just kind of contentious. It's hard to kind of nail down a real good like rating or a recommendation for this thing. There's some things that are like, I was very pleased by this stuff, very impressed by what they're doing, but then this thing happens over here, and it's like, oh, I don't fucking like that at all. Fuck that. I don't want to even watch the rest of this film at this point in time. There's just things that back and forth the entire thing that are kind of good, really exceptional, but there's things that are just like, I don't really like that at all. That's like, that? You're gonna go that way? I don't think so. It's like there's things on this film that are just all over the place in that regard. So it's like there's certain things are like they're fan servicey, and certain things are just kind of new and interesting, but some things are just like, it's a mishmash of different things that don't quite gel all together and don't sit entirely right with me for the entire thing. It's a whole bag of different things, and it kind of spans a lot of elements throughout all courses of the franchise, going forward and going backward and stuff like that. There's a lot of connections here and there, without a lot of things being paid off to a certain degree. It's like there's not a lot of justification for a lot of the fan service, because it doesn't really add anything to the film. It just detracts from it. The stuff that they do for people quoting lines that have no purpose to have in these scenes. They're just there, oh, get a rise on the audience. Oh, I remember that line for that film. Hey, no. It's like, I just sat there cringing. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? You're showing you have a great handle on the craft of this type of thing. You don't need to resort to this cheap garbage. You had such a good thing, had so much goodwill built up with a nice slow burn story. And good things like the CGI in this film, the effects work all over the place is phenomenally good. It all feels like it's exactly right out of that analog age of filmmaking, with such a great clarity and such a great painterly quality. When you're looking at the rings around this entire planet, they'll look exactly like you would have seen something back in the late 70s or the 80s or whatnot, when they just had these great matte paintings, stuff like that. There's such a great quality of artistic merit to what they're doing with so much of the film, that when you kind of go off these directions, just throw some slapdash freaking ideas from other films in there, it just doesn't land well. I don't like those moments. Like, if you can edit those things out, it would be a much better film to me. As it is, I'm just very conflicted about the whole thing. It's like there's a certain aspect of the entire film that I'm talking about in that bigger sensibility that makes me never want to watch this film again, because it's just going to piss me off every single time. It's not going to sit well with me anytime I watch it, because it didn't sit well with me now. So, I don't know. It's very hard for me to give you a recommendation of a non-spoiler review. So, trying to give you that impression of the thing, I just feel very conflicted. I've been looking at a lot of other people that have very mixed opinions about the entire film. It's being very much a divisive type of thing. So it really is just kind of the fact of, you kind of have to go see it for yourself to really kind of figure out your own opinion of it. I think that's kind of contradictory to me kind of doing a video and trying to tell you guys what I think and trying to figure out if there's a recommendation there. But sometimes something just lands on such a wide spectrum of opinion that it kind of comes down to figuring out where these things hit with you. If certain aspects of the film that I find contentious, maybe you're completely comfortable with. Various other things, so it's like it might hit different people in different ways. Some of these things are a little weird, and some things are a little less than excellent to my degree. Might hit people in a different type of way, but just for me, to tell you what my opinion is, I would like to like the film, but there's certain things that are just really knocking it down, just striking against it too hard for me to really give you a wholehearted recommendation. There is a lot of quality to this thing. I like this thing a lot more in some degrees than the 2013 Evil Dead, which I did not very much like. This one shows a lot better qualities in terms of what Fede Álvarez can do as a crafter of horror, but there's just certain ideas in terms of the franchise stuff that kind of goes off in weird directions. So guys, if you have seen it, let me know what your thoughts are. If you felt as conflicted about it as I am, if you felt like completely down on it or completely much more higher on it, just throw across the entire thing, because it's very hard for me to get a very straightforward opinion, because it's just not a straightforward film in that regard. So guys, thanks much, take care, thumbs up, comments, likes, subscribes, all the type of stuff helps extremely much on the channel. Super thanks feature to contribute anything directly to the channel to support us, and Patreon as well. So guys, thanks much, take care.